Hello and welcome to the Prepping for Everything podcast, where we discuss all things preparedness, self-sufficiency, homesteading, food preservation, animals, birth, life, death, and so much more. I assume that most of you are tuning in because you follow me from a social media platform, but if you're completely new here, hi, my name is Emily and thank you for joining us. I'm a firm believer that preparedness in particular ties into your whole life, and what I would really love from this podcast is to help change the negative connotations that surround prepping and self-sufficiency and show you just how normal it can be. Preparedness in my eyes is nothing more than assessing the needs of you and your family and planning ahead. So this is a little bit different, right? This is very different. I've been saying for probably a year or so now that I want to start a podcast to really dive deep into certain topics, as social media platforms can be quite limiting when you're restricted by short clips and text, and often your words can get misconstrued or taken out of context. So at least through here I can elaborate, or should I say ramble, until my heart's content. Surprisingly, with having a preparedness platform, it's not prepping that I've been most frequently asked about recently. It's actually been mainly surrounding pregnancy, labour and delivery. I think that might have something to do with the fact that 80% of my audience are women, so we're all kind of in the same boat here. And although this podcast isn't going to be totally about birth, I thought to kick off our first episode, I'm going to share a very personal story with you all, one that I am constantly being asked about, and that's my birth story. So let's jump right in. I'm sitting here at my bedroom, the quietest place of the house, with leaping baby Rosemary next to me, wondering where on earth I should start with this whole storytelling. So I'm going to go way back to the beginning, when I found out I was pregnant. This is mine and my husband Will's first baby, and although we were trying and it happened very quickly, I'm going to be honest with you in saying that one of the first feelings I felt when I saw the positive pregnancy test was pure fear. And that wasn't due to our life changing so massively, running a business, renovating a house, and all the new responsibilities that come with being a parent. That solely stemmed from the thought of having to go through labour, which is so sad. But in a way, I can see why that was my first response. Since young girls, I feel as though most of us are conditioned to fear birth. All we see through TV and movies are women screaming, generally strapped to their backs in a hospital bed, surrounded by bright lights and several medical people intervening. Not to mention that as soon as you announce that you're pregnant, you have every Tom, Dick and Harry, or Tina, Davina and Harriet, desperate to tell you how traumatic their birth was and how they almost bled out and died. Why do mothers do this to other fresh mothers, by the way? It's so bizarre to me. If you've experienced a traumatic birth, I don't want to take that away from you or make you feel like you can't speak or express what you went through, but there's a time and a place, and loading that onto new mothers is not it. I knew that I didn't want that to be my own narrative, and I was determined to do everything in my power to prevent that. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand birth doesn't always go to plan. It's a wild and raw experience, and we simply have to surrender to not being able to control everything. Our babies come into this world the way that they were designed to do so, and we don't get to always choose that completely. And you'll soon understand from the story that my birth plan went way out of the window. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't still an empowering and positive experience. I truly want other new mothers to know in particular that birth doesn't have to be scary and traumatic. It can also be beautiful. And after all, it's the most natural thing in the world. So for about 9 months of pregnancy, I went on this mission to just dive deep and understand as much as I could about birth and really recondition the way that I viewed it. And Once I got into it, it didn't take long to change my thinking. I genuinely listened to podcasts daily, read books, joined Facebook groups, hired a doula, took courses, practiced hypnobirthing, followed a whole foods diet, kept active, moved every day, spoke to other mothers who had great experiences of birth and really picked their brains on how they achieved that. I mean, in short, I was prepping for labour. Shock, huh? I guess it was just my own way of gaining some control of a situation. I always feel like the more knowledge that I have, the better I feel in knowing how to handle any situations that crop up. Now, you have to understand that before I got pregnant, I knew nothing about any of this. Like, seriously, I'll give you a laugh. I didn't know that you had to give birth to a placenta after you gave birth to a baby. This is where I was 9 months ago. I'm not kidding. I didn't know anything. So Please, if you're a first-time mum that's in the same position, just know that if I can change my mindset around this, then so can you. The more I learned, the more confident I got, and I just knew that I didn't want to give birth in a hospital if it could be avoided. I'm a low-risk, healthy individual who was having a great pregnancy, and I just saw no need for me to be somewhere that I didn't feel supported or safe. I personally don't love the medical system, and I feel as though it treats pregnant women as sick, ill, or broken, rather than simply pregnant. So for me, I wanted to be at home. I knew that being in my own cosy surroundings would best facilitate a physiological unmedicated birth, and that's what I wanted. This is of course my own views, and it's shaped by my own experiences throughout the years, and if you feel safer giving birth in a hospital, then give birth in a hospital. I know that's a disclaimer and a side note, but I'm going to repeat myself a lot throughout this podcast that not one size fits all. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm shunning anyone else for their own personal choices or decisions, and I just want to encourage everyone to do what resonates best with them. I actually did go through a lot of the medical system with antenatal care. In Scotland, we have the NHS, which is our National Health Service, and from when you find out you're pregnant, you see a midwife every sort of 4 weeks and just have a chat, make sure that you're feeling good, make sure the baby's good, and I was quite happy to do this. Throughout all of these midwife appointments, I didn't have one consistent midwife. Where we are, particularly in the north of Scotland, it's rural, and I know that they really, really struggle with staffing levels, which is difficult to get the care that you need as a pregnant woman, but I know it's hard. The NHS in general is understaffed, it's underfunded, it's overstretched, and the burnout rate for midwives is massive. They do a lot and they have a lot of responsibility, so I can see why it's difficult to get these things running. In hindsight, I really wish that we had hired a private midwife. They are very expensive here. It seems to be between £5,000 and £8,000, but I think that would have helped facilitate the birth that we wanted more than midwives that are in the NHS system. It's difficult for them to be a little bit more holistic because they have guidelines and rules that they need to follow as well, which I understand. So it wasn't until about my 32-week appointment, I think, that I mentioned that I wanted a home birth. And yeah, I guess it's just a bit rarer here, but you can tell that they weren't thrilled about it. I'm a very headstrong person, so I kind of said that if they couldn't help me do that, then I would be free birthing, which I didn't want to do. I didn't want to give birth without medical professionals there. Especially for Will, my husband, I could tell that he was panicking about all of this. He was my birth partner. He was my main support throughout all of this, and I didn't want him to be left with me at home worrying, because to create the environment that I wanted, everybody needs to feel good. Everyone needs to feel safe. Everyone needs to feel supported, and I personally didn't want to put that onto him. It really, really helped that we had a doula. Her name's Thijs. She's from Holland. She is just, oh my goodness, what an amazing human being. She was such a support to us throughout our pregnancy, and she was there at our birth as well. So if you're going down this route of wanting a home birth but you're unsure on a doula, this is your sign to work with a doula if you can. I know it's not an option for everybody, but it really did make the world of difference to us throughout everything. Just having somebody to talk to even every week about how you're feeling and what's happening in pregnancy, it made a big difference. Back to the midwives. Eventually, around 36 weeks, I had something which is called a home birth assessment. It's basically where the midwives come out and they just want to see what your house is like. If there's parking, if there's space for an ambulance, if you need an ambulance transfer last minute, all of these sort of things. It's almost just like a risk assessment, which was fine. There was 2 midwives there. One I really liked, one I just didn't vibe with. You get people like that in life. It's always going to happen. But basically I found this risk assessment was getting more and more intense as time went on. So they were there for about 2 hours, and basically it was just saying everything that could possibly go wrong. And I understand that. I know the risks of birth. I've looked into all of this. I've looked into how I can best prevent it. And it was really disheartening. Throughout my whole pregnancy, I felt really good. And after this 36-week appointment, I was left in floods of tears. My husband Will works away most of the time. He's a welder. He works offshore. And I can just remember phoning him and I could hardly breathe on the phone because I was that unsettled. They made me feel like I was doing something wrong, that I was being foolish for not getting any more scans. I didn't want another scan. They were telling me that they were concerned that I had a really big baby. They wanted a scan to make sure that baby wasn't too big, but it wouldn't have changed the way that I would have handled the situation anyway, because I didn't want a cesarean section. I truly believe that my body's not going to make a baby that's too big for me, and I didn't want to be induced because of it, because there's no guidelines or data that supports inducing women for big babies. I kind of said that to them. The nice midwife left, and the one that I didn't vibe with kind of went on this rant about free birthing and how birth can be so dangerous, and that I was wrong for considering that, and that she had to resuscitate a baby and there was 4 of them working on this baby for hours, and it was just a really, really weird experience. And I think that she ramped up in her coercion and fear-mongering once the other midwife left. It was almost like she could get away with it. But I stood my ground. I'm really good at dealing with situations in the moment. And then afterwards is when I get really upset about them. Looking back in it, like, I just can't believe they do that to women who are that late on in their pregnancy. Like, what is the need to cause all this stress? And it's just, in my opinion, it's unnecessary. Somebody who's typically wanting to birth at home has done a lot of research to birth at home. When she left, she actually phoned me again and continued going on about the risk of shoulder dystocia and big babies. Now, the only reason they thought I had a big baby is because she was measuring big by them measuring my bump. And it had never been done by the same person. It had been done by 3 different people, and I was in 3 different places having that done. Like, one time was on a couch, for example, one time was on the bed. It wasn't consistent. So for me, I wasn't happy with the outcomes of what they were telling me. I felt really good to myself, and I was happy to continue going on with the plans that I had made, whether I was supported or not in that decision. And by the way, that huge baby that they kept going on about was 8 pounds. Completely manageable and totally healthy, and didn't need any of the intervention that they were panicking about needing. So anyway, time kept ticking on and we were getting closer to the date. I thought for sure that I was having a 2023 baby. I thought I was going to go about 37 weeks. My mum was a month early, or I was a month early with my mum. And I really, really thought that was going to be the same with me. So when we got to the end of December, I was just kind of like, okay, what's going on? Because I already felt overdue. I think probably most pregnant women can relate to this. Those last few weeks of pregnancy are hard. You can hardly move. You're out of breath with everything. You're so uncomfortable. You just want to be able to lie on your back again. Like, the feelings are intense. And I never wanted to be induced, but I was having some thoughts about it when we crossed over into January, because I was like, I just feel like I'm going to be pregnant forever at this stage. What is going on? So the week that she came, I went to see Kasim in the city. He's an acupuncturist. He's amazing. I went to see him and I just sort of said, look, can we maybe hit the pressure points or the acupuncture points that might help encourage her out? And so we did that. I had a pregnancy massage. I think that was the Wednesday and the Thursday. And then on the Saturday, my waters broke. And I was at my parents'. I was cuddling my dog in front of the fire, lying down. And when I went to sit up from lying down, I just felt this gush. It wasn't a pop like you see in the movies. It wasn't really dramatic like that. I was just kind of like, oh, and I didn't know, did I pee myself? So I kind of got up and ran to the toilet, and it was clear waters, and I went back into the room and I told everyone, Will, my mum and my dad, that my waters had just burst, and everybody thought I was joking. And then poor Will went white as a ghost when he realised that I was being serious. So that happened twice, that leaking of fluids. That was at 3:00 on Saturday afternoon. So we went home, we walked the dogs, we just had a cozy night, and contractions started really lightly at maybe about 5:00. They weren't consistent at all. They weren't intense. They started to ramp up later into the night. When I tried to go to bed, they got pretty intense. So maybe about 11:00. I slept until 1, but I was really struggling to sleep through them because they kept waking me up. So I got up and I went downstairs. I sort of sat on my birth ball for a while and then just got cozy on the couch, watched a good movie, just tried to keep my oxytocin high. And this is probably, looking back, where I think I went wrong because I really, really should have tried to sleep through them. And I can remember hearing this on all of the podcasts. Everybody was saying, especially for a first-time mom, it can be a long labour, really try and sleep through the contractions. But when I lay down, they were so intense that I couldn't sleep through them. I went into all of this very sleep deprived. I think I had about 2 hours of sleep, and they were fizzling off and then coming back. There was no consistency to them. So I phoned my midwife on the Sunday and I just sort of said what was going on, because I know that in the UK, I don't know if it's everywhere else. I know that in the UK anyway, that after 24 hours of your waters breaking, they want to take you into hospital for monitoring because the risk of infection can go up. Now that's different in other places. Other places is 48 hours, other places is 72 hours. I felt fine at home so long as I had no signs of infection. I was taking my temperature. My waters weren't stained in any way. My midwife was happy with that as well. It was this really cool midwife from Australia. We got on great. She was a fan of home births, so I couldn't have been more lucky to have her. So we went into the whole of Sunday with things not really changing. Like, the contractions were coming every 3 minutes, but sometimes they were intense, sometimes they weren't. I was still able to speak and move and walk through them. I walked the dogs, and we were just trying to have as normal a day as possible. And then the midwife came out on Sunday afternoon to check me and make sure everything was fine, check the baby's heart rate, and just try and see what's going on. And it was then that I had a bit of a breakdown to her, and I can remember crying and just saying that I felt like my body was broken and that nothing was progressing and that maybe my body didn't know how to do this. And she was like, Emily, it just takes time. You're going to be fine. It was the emotional release that I needed, because when she left, things really ramped up. I got to the point I was hypnobirthing and trying to breathe through them, and I asked Will to phone Kirsty back. And she came back and I was like, whoa, this is more intense than I thought it would be. And she was like, this is a good thing. This is a great thing. It means that you're closer to meeting your baby. And I think that is exactly the words I needed to hear at that point, because it really changed my mindset. It's not just pain, it's pain with a purpose, and it's totally manageable. And there are so many thousands of other women around the world birthing with you at this moment. It just helped snap me back into what I wanted and why I was doing this. So she encouraged me to get into the shower, and what a game changer that was. I was on all fours in the shower. It was just so nice feeling the water on my back. I had essential oils in there and I was managing. Things were going good. I don't know what time it was. Maybe 8 or 9. I couldn't keep track of time at all. I was just in labour land at this point. But Kirsty had to leave because she had hit her time quota for how long she could work. It would be dangerous if she kept working all through the day and all into the night without sleep. So she tapped out, and the next midwife that came was the one that I didn't really vibe with, and it kind of went downhill from there. I felt like with this midwife, I was trying to get away from her. I was going into all different places of the house and trying to lock myself away, which I know is normal in pregnancy anyway. You know, we're very animalistic in that sense. You want to find a dark, cozy space to fully relax and give birth, but all I wanted was Will. I was so tired by this point. It had been a long time without sleep, but we were getting there. And then I was with Will upstairs beside the bed. I was crouched down beside the bed, and I can remember having this one contraction that my body pushed naturally. It was like my body bared down. I was like, whoa, that was different. And so I knew that I was getting close to meeting my baby. And at that point, it's kind of like you can still feel the intensity, but it's not as bad because you know that it's going to be over soon. But I can remember saying to him, which is probably silly looking back on it, that I was feeling pushy, but don't tell the midwife. So by the time the midwife came in to check baby's heart rate, because she was doing that intermittently, and I was happy with that intermittently, I wanted at the end of the day to make sure that baby was doing fine. She heard one of my contractions and she knew that it was pushy. There she freaked out. She really did freak out. Maybe it's because she didn't realise I was as far on as what I was, because we didn't tell her. I'll hold my hands up and take credit for that one. Maybe I should have told her. Yeah, she freaked out and she said, oh, you can't be pushing unless you're 10 centimetres dilated. And I thought, well, of course I'm 10 centimetres dilated because my body did it for me. I'm not trying to push. My body's doing it. But anyway, she wanted to check and I was 10 centimetres dilated. And then she checked baby's heart rate and she freaked out 10 times more. Baby's heart rate was dipping a little bit and she flew downstairs screaming at Will to phone an ambulance. My doula was like, what is going on? And she said, baby's heart rate's dipping and we need to get an ambulance here. And my doula, she tried to keep everything calm. She was like, is this not normal when a baby is going through the birth canal? A baby is working really hard to get out of the body. Mama's working really hard to get the baby out of the body. Is this not normal? And she was like, well, it can be normal, but at least in hospital we have a room full of people to deal with this. And it's upsetting to look back on, because without ruining the story for you all, baby was absolutely fine and I was absolutely fine. So she phoned an ambulance. I think it was about 3 a.m. 2 showed up, and at this point, I could put my fingers inside of me and I could feel her hair. I could feel her head. I knew that I was so close to meeting this baby, and it's really sad to think this is how the last moments of her birth went. It was just panicked unnecessarily, and I can remember she came back upstairs and she was like, we need to go right now because you're risking your baby dying. She said those words to me when I was practically crowning. And in the moment, I'm like, I know everything's fine, but there's also that part of you that worries that you're being stupid. I would never, ever want to put her at risk just because I wanted to have a home birth, right? I was always open to going to the hospital if there was an emergency and if I needed to go. But I genuinely didn't feel like this was an emergency. But I was tired by this point. It had been almost 2 days on 2 hours of sleep. I hardly ate anything. I couldn't keep anything down. And I just thought, you know what, let's just go in the ambulance. So I went in. Will took the car with the doula and they drove up together because we wanted a car up at the hospital to get home in the next day. The hospital's about an hour away from us, so we just wanted to make sure that we were covered on that. I made it downstairs. Now, at this point, I'm a woman in transition. I was shaking so bad. I was trying to speak and it was like, the intensity of birth is a lot. I got into the ambulance. They wanted to strap me down on the bed because legally they said that they couldn't drive if I was standing up. And the only way that I could manage contractions was to either be on all fours or standing. So I tried to lie down. The contractions were so overpowering and I absolutely lost it. They strapped me down. I felt like I was a mental patient in a hospital. I made them pull over. I was screaming and shouting. It's 3:30 in the morning. And I said to them, there's no effing way that I am going up in the hospital like this. I lost it. And it's quite embarrassing to look back on, but really none of this should have happened. So I leapt out of the ambulance. It was so foggy. I didn't have my glasses on and I couldn't see very much. I left my glasses at home in amongst all the madness, and Will was like, what is going on? But he drove with me up to the hospital and the ambulance followed behind us because we were sure that baby was going to come out en route. I was in the passenger seat on my knees with my hands around the headrest, facing back towards the rear of the car, and I was pushing the whole way to the hospital. It was mental. We eventually got to the hospital. I waddled out of the car, made it into the labour suite. The hospital staff were all amazing. I can't fault any of them. But this surgeon came in and he was concerned about baby's heart rate. It had probably been a good few hours now that she was in the birth canal, so I can understand why. And he said to me, I have 20 minutes to push her out, and if I didn't, that I would need to go to theatre. He was going to try forceps, but she was in an awkward place because he said that she was a wee bit high up for forceps, but she was too far down for a cesarean to be safely done. Those words kicked me into a different level. I was determined to get this girl out and get her out soon. And it was just mental from there. The lights were on. It was kind of everything that I didn't want. There was a room full of people. They made Will go and get into hospital scrub so that he was ready for going into theatre. People were taking my rings and my earrings off for going into theatre, and people were trying to make me sign things. There was a anesthesiologist, did I pronounce that right? I probably messed that up, trying to explain everything to me and make me sign sheets. And I was like, can everyone just give me 2 minutes? Baby's coming, but nobody was listening to me. And then this absolute angel sent from above. She was the youngest midwife in that room. I think she must have been in her 20s or early 20s. She reached round and she was like to me, if this baby's coming, push. Push with everything you've got, bear down and go with it. But by this point, my contractions were really tailing off. I think, well, I'd been moved from my safe place and your body knows that, and I was exhausted. And so I was struggling to even feel when they were coming. But she really helped me. She took my hand. And while everyone was trying to pull me off to theatre, I was crowning. And I can remember saying, like, baby's here, and no one was listening. And then this young midwife pulled the hospital gown up and she was like, oh my goodness, baby is here. Another few pushes and she came flying out of me. She cried straight away. She was pink and chubby and healthy, and the feelings I felt in that moment was so overwhelming. Just pure ecstasy and pure happiness. I can't believe what having an unmedicated birth must do, because I felt there's no pain, there's no discomfort, and the hormones that wash over you, like, you can feel them pumping through your body. It was like the most intense trip I have ever had in my life. And it turns out at this moment we found out that baby was back to back. So her back was facing my back, which is the opposite way round of where babies are optimally positioned to come out. So this is why contractions were really sporadic, and this is why labour was really long, and this is why I was feeling a lot of pain in my back and hips. I don't think I felt any surges in the front of my body. So they could see her turn last minute as she was coming out. But yeah, they say that back-to-back labour is typically sorer than general standard normal positioned labour, if that makes sense. I know normal varies from woman to woman, but I'm just here to tell all new mums that no matter how many horrific TikTok stories that you watch, labour is completely manageable, or it was for me. I don't want to speak for everybody, but your body's designed to do this. Contractions come and then they go. You're not in pain for the whole duration of your labour. They come in waves, and yes, it peaks and then it tails off again, and you can handle it. It's completely manageable. And I just wish that other people spoke to me like this when I was pregnant, because I sat for hours trying to figure out what it felt like and what everybody else experienced and if I'd be able to manage, because I am not someone who handles pain well. But again, I know I already said this, but this is pain with a purpose. It's so different from the likes of stubbing your toe. Watch me stub my toe and I will be on the floor rolling about. Watch me go through contractions. I was probably the same, but I knew it had an end point. And that's pretty much it. I don't really have much else to tell you. Looking back on everything, I know, like, anytime I've told the story to my friends and family, or even the midwives, they kept saying to me, like, you had a really traumatic time. And I don't see it as that. I didn't have a traumatic time. I had a empowering birth experience. Sure, it went differently from what I thought it was going to go. Not everything went to plan, but does birth ever really go to plan? What I would do differently is not have anybody in my home that isn't fully supportive of me or the birth that I'm having. And I know that a lot of midwives within the system say that they support birth, but there's a big difference in fully trusting a woman's ability to give birth and whisking them off to hospital as soon as they start pushing. So it's been 1 month now, and I am finally coming out of the fog of sleep deprivation. I think I prepared so much for labour that I didn't really prepare that much for what comes afterwards. I wish I'd just slept for 9 months to really, really build up what I needed to get through these first few weeks. But I hope from this story, at least in some way, that first-time mums can take solace in knowing that you can do this. Your body knows what it's doing. You're designed for birth. And on that note, let's wrap this up before I find another tangent to go into. If labour and delivery isn't your jam, then don't be put off the podcast yet, as we are going to be discussing different topics on here every Wednesday. So if you enjoyed this, please don't forget to hit subscribe to get updates from me every week. And if you're feeling kind, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a review on your streaming app to help other people find me as well. I'm going to leave you with a clip from a precious song that Rosemary's very talented Auntie Olivia wrote and sang for her. She actually recorded this through WhatsApp, so that's the clip that I'm linking into here. We have Italian friends who call Rosemary Maria Rosa instead, so that's what she's referred to in this song. It honestly makes me cry every time I listen to it, and I would just love to share the beauty of the song with you all. If you'd like to hear more from Olivia and her wonderful voice, then I've linked her album below in the show notes where you can hear more or purchase. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you all next week.
So many hands for you to hold. They're strong and tender, wide open, waiting. They're praying as we say hello to Maria Rosa. With your father's eyes and your mother's heart, the perfect mix of two for you to play your part. And though new to the world, you learn through these years that both joy and pain equally bring tears. You are a beacon burning bright in our cold, dark winter nights. The wait is over, you have come, our darling little one. You've changed everything around, like a diamond, glittering, sparkling, glistening, loving as we say